Snow had a way of swallowing sound at Castle Black, as if every drift were a ready palm pressed over a mouth. The yard below John's window was soft with it, smooth except where the boots of men and the pads of ghost had scored their slants. Wind worked at the merlins and left pale feathers of rime upon the stone. The day's light was the thin kind, brittle as old glass. John stood at the slit window and drew his finger down the frost that filmed the lead, then wiped the bead of melt on his wool. He was supposed to be reading letters. Clydas had stacked them on the table and put a rock upon them, the rock dark and wet where it had warmed the room out of its own cold. Clydas called it thrift and John called it stubbornness. A small fire snapped in the hearth. Melisandre's people had brought up new charcoal, and every brazier in the castle since glowed like an ember set under a tongue. The top letter had Cotter Pike's blocky, angry hand. John dreaded it before he read it. Pike's words were always a wind with sand in it, stinging even where there was no need. He took it up and broke the seal. The captain of Eastwatch wrote that the sea had coughed up a half-drowned Lycene and a beak-faced ship of no great size, that the man had tried to sell him a cask he claimed was wine but refused to drink, that the cask itself warmed his cabin by its nearness and made the candles gutter like men at a leeching, and that he didn't want it, damned if he did, not with the wind turning and the ice thickening along the strand. There were other things, too, Pike's perpetual quarrels and the way the world was always cheating him, but John found himself reading those lines again. A cask that warmed a room, a seller who would not taste his own wares. Wine that will not be drunk, he said aloud, and Ghost, who lay with his head upon his paws, lifted his red eyes at the sound of John's voice but did not stir otherwise. The direwolf's coat was not white anymore. The yard had left smears of soot and ash upon it, and the tips of his ears were rimed where he had nosed the edge of the wall earlier. Dolorous Ed stepped out of the shadow the doorway had made. If it's wine, it will be gone by sup, and if it isn't, it'll be stolen by sup, and we'll all have bellyache and pride in equal measure. John folded the letter, tugged a loop of cord from around his wrist, and bound it again. Tell the head steward to send a sled down to the switchback when the watch changes. If Eastwatch sends by way of Queensgate, we can meet it before the worst of the storm. Ed's face made its usual confusion with ruin. A sled, Lord Commander? If I tell the head steward, he'll send two. If I tell Yarwick, he'll ask for what we don't have. If I tell Bowen, he'll call a council about carts and everyone will enjoy themselves. Or we could simply leave the cask at Eastwatch where it can warm Cotter Pike's heart, because nothing else ever did. Get the sled, John said, less patient than he wished to be. I want to see it before Celis hears of it. If it's worth taking, it will be worth fighting for. Ed scratched at his head and squinted at the fire as though it might answer. I'll fetch men and rope and whatever else gets in the way, he said at last, and dragged his boots out into the corridor, sighing as if he had dropped something behind him he would never recover. When the door shut, John found himself again looking down into the yard. Twins, small boys, both too young, both too hungry, were throwing a ball of rag at each other with the fierce concentration of sworn brothers. A barrel had frozen to the ground just beneath the armory stair, and Yarwick was cursing it with a craftsman's care. A pair of Queen's men, their cloaks like bleeding banners in the white air, went past with a crate between them. John's throat tasted of iron. He rubbed the ache between his eyes where worry made its nest and turned back to the letters. Another from the Shadow Tower, an old message from the south, all news worn thin by the time it reached them. He put them aside unopened. He wondered what Maester Aemon would have said of a cask that warmed a room. Aemon would have laughed, perhaps, or set a toothless mouth to the wood and tried a sip to spite a liar. He would have told a story about a thing that warmed without fire. John could hear the old man's voice in memory, a dry whisper that somehow made the hearth seem cheerful. He set that echo aside, too. Ghost rolled onto his side and thrust his legs out in sleep, toes twitching. The direwolf's breath clouded before his muzzle in little steady plumes. By the time the sled came, the light had pulled itself tight as a belt. Ed had done what he said he would, which was more than the usual miracle. The sled runners hissed on the ice, and 4 men shouldered the ropes with their heads down, while another pair bent to lift a dark barrel. The barrel was smaller than a cask of wine would be, narrower but heavier by the way they leaned. Frost striated the iron hoops and furred the staves. When the men set it down, a whisper of steam walked up along the seams and was snatched away by the wind. It wasn't a trick of breath or tired limbs. The thing was warm, then, as Pike had written, warm enough to melt thin frost in the very air. Yarwick's cheeks had gone the color of a beaten beet. "Damn me if I'll have strange fire set near my stores," he said at once, which made Ed cough in a way that could have been laughter or choking. "We'll take it to the armory floor. Stone's thicker there." "Not to the Queen," Jon said. Yarwick gave him a look with more splinters in it than pine. "Your word, Lord Snow." "My word," Jon said. He put a hand to the barrel. The heat seeped into his glove at once, a quiet insistence pressing to his palm. Felt like catching a living thing. Not the quick blaze of a coal, but something with a pulse. "We'll open it in my solar. Ed, see if Melisandre is still in the Queen's tower. And send for Clyda's too." Ed's mouth made an unhappy line. When two people who both believe in fire are asked to look at the same spark, it never ends in a warm conversation. "But as you command." He stepped away, and the men took the ropes again. The sled's runners rasped as the barrel moved, its steel hoops ticking whenever it bumped. Jon walked with them, feeling the heat seep into the narrow space of the stair and the cramped corridor. Sweat started beneath his shirt where the wool touched skin. By the time they reached his door, Ghost was awake and ahead of them, tail up, ears pricked, his paws leaving damp crescents on the stone as the barrel breathed out the cold that lay settled there. Clyda's shuffled in with his hands tucked into his sleeves. Melisandre came after, the ruby at her throat fallen like a dried cherry into snow. It seemed to glow of its own opinion. Jon waved away the men. "Put it there," he said, pointing to the patch of floor where the flagstones were most intact. The barrel thumped down with a sound too soft for its weight, as if the wood were muffled from within. "Shall I bring tools?" Yarwick asked. Jon nodded. "A pry bar and a hammer." Melisandre watched, serene and sharp at once. The glow in her stone found the glow within the barrel and made a kindling between. Clyda sniffed. "I should like to say at once that this is foolish," he said, "so that I can later say I warned you." "You may mark the day and time," Jon said. "Then you may watch." "You have never had a talent for comfort," Clyda said, but he was already blotting with charcoal on a scrap of vellum, bent close to the hearth light. Yarwick came back with a set of iron tools that could have mended a gate. He set the pry teeth beneath the hoops and lifted. The first ring went with a groan, the second with a thud. When the head came off, steam sighed up, and a scent came with it. Not wine, not vinegar, but something like wet stone after lightning. Something like the breath of a forge when the bellows are still. The straw inside had dampened to the color of old tea. Melisandre leaned forward. The oval in the damp straw glimmered with scale. Even in the dim, it caught. It lay upon its side as if it slept, and no prettiness of other eggs came to mind. Jon had never seen a dragon's egg. He had only seen scenes on banners and listened to old stories till the words had worn the shape of a thing he thought he knew. He had expected something more luminous or more lurid, scales like jewels. This egg was the color of deep wells and midnight ash. Scales overlapped in tight fishbone chevrons. When the light struck, a hint of other hue slid across like oil. Violet, he thought, but that was too small a word for it. It was a bruised plum trying to be a star. At one end, the scale pattern tightened like the swirl of hair on an infant's crown. Ghost made a sound that was not quite a growl. Melisandre drew his attention with the lift of her chin. "Fire remembers friends," she observed, voice a draught of mulled wine. "Warm and spiced and a little sweet, and as dangerous to those who thirsted for it. There is heat inside this stone. There has been heat kept for a long while. It warmed the cabin on Cotter Pike's ship," Jon said, "and this room, it warms the air around itself. Heat hoarded is not the same as heat freed." She held her hands over it without touching. "It is like a coal banked, thirsty." Clydas peered, careful to keep his hands in his sleeves. "We should wrap it back up," he said. "If it keeps a measure of warmth, let it keep for itself. It will not quench our cold, nor boil our porridge. We have a king's wife who will like the thought of owning it, Yarwick said, uneasy. And a red woman who will insist it belongs to her god. It belongs to the Night's Watch, Jon said, more certain than he felt. It was sent to Eastwatch, and the Eastwatch sent it to us. No one burns it and no one parades it. We will keep it away from the Queen's notice for now. Melisandre's smile was a knife unsharpened, one that would still cut if pressed. You will keep it? It will keep you, perhaps. Fires do not belong to hands. Hands belong to fires. Jon felt that heat again on his palm from when he had touched the barrel, the steady press through the glove, the way it had seemed to move and then gone still. He lifted the egg, and the weight of it made his breath catch. It was like lifting a child not yet awake, heavy and loose at once, and also like taking up a stone that had sat too long in the sun. His pulse found a twin somewhere within. He carried it to the corner where a brazier stood. He set the egg near the iron bowl, but not in it, letting the brazier's heat find it. Blood calls to blood, Melisandre said, so low he nearly missed it. What do you mean? Clydas peered as if there might be a droplet to wipe up. Nothing at all. Melisandre's gaze had gone to the egg on the floor with a greed that had more to do with longing than with coin. I mean, only that warmth wants a place to go. Yarwick left, shaking his head. Clydas, not comforted, stayed to glare as a sort of prayer. Ed returned with gloves that had holes in all the important places and a cloth stiff with old salt. If we're keeping that, I suppose we're keeping all the trouble that goes with it, Ed announced. I will put on my best expression of surprise when it finds us. Do that, Jon said. We'll need the laugh. He dismissed them all but Ghost and the egg. He sat on the low chair by the window and listened to the sounds the thing did or did not make. It made none he could swear to. It drank the heat with a patient appetite. When he leaned close, his breath fogged upon its scales and ran down in tiny rivulets that sank between them. He thought of old tales of princesses with eggs on pillows and of princes who sold them for ships. He thought of flame-shy barns and boys smitten with bravery. He thought of Stannis's narrow face and Cella's stiff posture and the Queen's men with their unkind lead lantern eyes. He thought of his brothers and of the way the wall's shadow cut the yard in a line like the seam between one life and another. Ghost settled with his belly on Jon's boot. The red of his eyes caught a stray spark from the brazier and held it for a moment. Jon reached down and scratched the thick fur at his scruff. He had done it so many times that his hand knew the places itched and the places pleased. He found the rough indent of an old bite and the smooth lick of a scar and felt the hum of the wolf's breath in his wrist. When he raised his hand, his palm was damp with wolf heat and the air felt colder. He held that hand unconsciously above the egg, as if he could share something between them. He told himself nothing happened, that nothing was happening. 2 days later, Snow and the Queen discovered the same secret at once. The snow, because the wind came out of the north in a long howl that made the wall sing and shook the icicles along the eaves loose like spears. The Queen, because nothing in Castle Black could stay hidden long from her. Celis came into the armory with 2 Florents in her wake and her chin drawn to point at whatever she disliked. Her gaze found the egg in a spill of brazier light and stopped. She crossed herself before the lightless son of her god. What have you brought under my roof without my leave, Lord Snow? Our roof, Jon said, feeling the awkwardness of the possessive even as he spoke. And it came to us from Eastwatch. I was not consulted by the sea. The Florents looked as if that answer were a kind of ointment that stung. The Queen came nearer with an appetite of her own. She did not touch the egg. She circled it as if it were a beast upon a chain, and she meant to find the length of that chain before risking a closer move. Dragonspawn Rock, she pronounced, a relic of wicked kings and wives who danced with ruin. It is a crown of sin in the shape of an egg. Or an expensive pebble, Jon said. If it were a crown, it would have a head. You will hand it over to me, she said, still staring. The king is absent, and his lady keeps what is of consequence for him. The egg came with a letter, Jon lied, light as frost. From Cotter Pike, addressed to the Lord Commander. If you have one about the egg addressed to the queen, I will read it with a sincere curiosity. Celis turned upon him with a look that spoke of hunger denied. You take too much on yourself, she said. You have for days. She leaned again toward the egg. It warms, she added, more to herself than to anyone. I can feel it here. Her hand hovered briefly over her chest. The ruby in Melissandra's throat sent a patient flicker. Melisandra, who had come in behind Celis as silent as steam, gave one of her little smiles. Some stones, she said, only remember, others recall the future too. The king will know of it, Celis said at last, and it will be with me when he returns. Jon inclined his head as far as respect required and no farther. We will speak of it when he returns, he said. The queen's mouth became a line that could have cut rope. She left, dragging indignation in her wake like a cloak. Melisandra stayed. You should give it to me, said the Red Woman, when the sound of Celis' boots had gone down the stair. You are a careful steward of cold things. I am an obedient custodian of warmth. I will keep it, Jon said. If it's merely a curiosity, it can remain so where it is. If it's a danger, I am unwilling to place it in the queen's hands. If it's a blessing... He stopped before he had unbarred his thoughts to her. If it's a blessing, your oath forbids you from receiving it? Melisandra finished. There are oaths stout as iron, and oaths whose links have frozen and cracked. Your vows do not speak of dragon eggs. They speak of no crowns, Jon said. He had not meant to, but the words had their own way out. I am not a king. I am set here for guarding, not gathering. She watched him with that one-eyed clarity she sometimes had, where the visible eye saw him and the other turned inward to see something else. Then she bent near the egg and closed her hands briefly above it, not touching. The wind will be like a broom tonight, she said, changing ground. It will sweep many tracks away and leave one that matters. Jon remembered Pike's letter, the thin lamplight and the heavy warmth of the barrel. He thought of the way the egg skin felt through a glove. What track? He asked. He did not expect an answer, and so he was not disappointed when she gave none. That night the storm arrived with a scream that made the old stones weep in their cracks. Snow came through the broken places as if it knew the rooms where warmth dared live and meant to smother each. Jon stood a watch on the wall for the look of it. Eyes slit near to closed, breath making smoke, the wind a hand forcing him toward the edge. In the morning his brows had a rime that washed in salty drops when he came down into the corridors. The whole castle had that wet smell that comes after a night of bad weather. Wet wool, wet leather, old water freshened in its own bucket. Men had wrapped cloth around their boots and still the wet found them. Ghost was a soft blur in the fog of everyone's breath. White upon white were it not for the flash of his eyes. The egg lay just where he had left it, near the brazier in his solar, as if it had never moved in all its life. Yet something had changed without changing. The scales were still scales, the oval still an oval, but the lines of it no longer looked quite like stone to his eye. He crouched and laid his palm on it. The heat spoke to him like an animal speaks to someone who knows its language. He found that the warmth seemed to move a little beneath his hand, not traveling in circles or lines, but roving and returning, a tide under his palm. When he lifted his hand away, dampness glistened on his skin, not sweat. He put his thumb to it and tasted it like a boy might with some new unknown. The salt of his own hand was there and another taste as well, iron and the memory of smoke. He wiped his palm on his breeches, ashamed of the impulse and also not ashamed at all. There was work to do. There was always work. Men to set to clearing the foot of the wall. The dead tree near the rookery that had finally given up and would need to be felled. Its trunk a poor candidate for anything but burning. Stores to count with Bowen Marsh's gloomy arithmetic. Val's request to be ignored or answered with careful words. He did all of it. Every act like a rosary bead, he turned with his fingers to keep his mind disciple to his tasks. But whenever he passed his solar, he felt the pull. The small persuasion that the egg was offering him not temptation but companionship. He told himself he had been alone in other ways and in harder places. He told himself that a stone cannot want you. By afternoon, the storm was at its laziest and meanest, and the sky was the color of a burn bruising. A packet arrived from Eastwatch with 3 ravens that had found their way to Queensgate instead, and another letter from Cotter Pike. This one was shorter and more nettled. It spoke of a Licini who had died of the cold the day after he had tried to sell the cask, and of a scrap of parchment that had been sewn into the lining of the man's belt, found when Pike's quartermaster went through what little he had. The scrap was included. It had suffered for its travels, corners gnawed by damp, edges furred where they had been abraded by cloth and skin and salt. The writing was in a narrow, slanted hand, with the spare exactness of a man who had learned letters as a second tongue. John read the words twice and a third time. He held the scrap near the fire, but not too near, the ink shining a little where it had sunk deeper. For the young. The line began and then broke where the scrap had broken. It resumed lower, not to be opened except where the sage H directs. Trust the hand of Griff. Trust the company whose contracts bind. There was more. A line of High Valyrian so tangled John stumbled over it even in the silence of his mind, and a sigil sketched in haste with the same ink. A standing dragon, not the 3-headed one. Its wings folded in a shape unlike any John had ever seen upon a Westerosi banner. The sketch was crude but practiced, like a man writing his name 1,000 times till the motion left ink in the shape of habit. He held the scrap in his fingers for a long time while the fire gave small complaints in the grate. He thought of names men had given themselves and of those given to them. There had been talk of a prince across the sea whose name belonged to the fiery family, thrown down in a place called the Trident. A boy who had not died when he should have, and who wanted now what his father had once wanted. That talk had traveled north on wagons and boots, thinner at every mile, until what the men in the yard said was no longer certain whether the boy had eyes or money. He had never seen a contract from that company, but men swore by the weight of their promises the way other men swore by iron. Griff, a color as much as a title, a name that was not a name. A cough at the door woke him out of his thoughts. Bowen Marsh stood there like a piece of winter dressed in honest clothes. "Your tally," Marsh said, holding out a set of marks on a board. "We are leaner than last month. The river froze quicker than we hoped, and the last drive of venison went to feed the Queen's household. I told the stewards to divide." "You told them much," Marsh said, and bowed his head in a way that insulted nothing but appeased less. "We saw to what we could." His eyes strayed to the egg and away and back again, like a man who does not want to be seen looking at a particular woman in a small room. "And this, a curiosity with a price we do not yet know," John said. "If every problem announced itself with a smell like thunder, we would be better at avoiding the storm." "We cannot eat it," Marsh said. "It does not pull a cart or wield an axe. It draws eyes and appetite." "So do diamonds," John said, to his own surprise. "We are a poor house, Bowen. We use what we find and we guard what we cannot use until we know whose hand it ends in." "Let it be the king's hand," Marsh advised. Worry softened him, made him an uncle again instead of an adversary. "I cannot count this on my board, Lord Commander." He tapped the slate with a thick finger. "There are things you are better at counting. Enemies, friends. Sometimes they're the same number," John said. He set the slate aside, his mind still on the parchment's slanted hand and its practiced sketch. "You have my leave." After Marsh left, John put the scrap away under a wooden dish with his few other private things. A gauntlet whose leather had cracked where his hand had once bled through it. A square of cloth from Bran's cradle blanket, clean washed, but with the smell he told himself he had invented. He put the dish back in its place and put the place back into the room, as if the secrecy of a thing depended as much on the choreography of ordinary motions as upon the locking of chests. Night came early and mean. It tapped the window with little knives and hummed in the space between the walls. John could not sleep. He went from the window to the fire to the egg and back again, a triangle of unrest. Ghost followed him with heavy patience until the wolf gave up and climbed onto the bed to make nausea of the linens with his damp fur. Somewhere near the hour when men with fever mutter and men without fever swear that the dark has a weight of its own, John knelt beside the egg. He had replaced the coals with fresh ones, and the brazier's iron was just shy of a dull red. The egg seemed darker than it had before. No, deeper, as if its color had thickened. He did not know whether he imagined it or the light was playing a trick that could be written down in a rational book. He put his hands around it without touching. Heat climbed into his palms and made his skin feel like new parchment. He took a breath and let it go, and the breath came out white. He thought of Ghost sleeping behind him and of the silence that had so much in it. The slight pop of sap from wood he could not even see burning in the lower kitchens, the minuscule hiss as a coal slipped and made room for another. He thought of Maester Aegon and of how the egg would have interested him, and not because of kings. "What are you?" he asked, because he was alone enough to say it aloud. "Who are you meant for?" The words vanished into the thick air. His hand went to his belt without conscious intent. He took his knife. The blade had been sharpened until it was thin as a rule, and it caught no light because there was none to catch. He meant to tap the egg to feel the give of it. He did not do it. Instead, his thumb slipped where a blister from an earlier day had a thin new skin, and the thin new skin tore and left a bead of blood, fat and bright. It swelled and then ran, a thread without dignity. He inhaled, annoyed with himself, and then the drop fell from his thumb and landed upon the egg. It sat there like a ruby laid down in a field of scales. It did not spread because the scales were tight and dry. It made a round of color, and it seemed to quiver ever so slightly, though there could have been Jon's own hand unsteady above it. He did not wipe it away. He did not do anything. His breath came out and came back white. He lowered his blood-wet thumb and held it beneath the brazier to scorch the skin and stop what more it would give. It hurt, and he had the penny satisfaction pain can give to a man who prefers to feel anything reading as truth rather than the deceit of his own anxious thoughts. The egg answered his inattention. A sound, not a crack yet. A small sound like two fingernails brushed together by accident in a lecture hall. Jon's head came up before he knew he had moved it. He had been a boy listening for wolves once. He remembered the position. The head tipped, the neck stiff, the ear trying to be a cup. The egg gave the sound again, a slightly different trilling scrape. Ghost's head lifted on the bed. The direwolf stood, paused sinking the mattress, and then leapt down to the floor with a thump that seemed discourteous to the solemnity of the room and came to stand at Jon's side. The next sound was louder, not a crack yet. The thing was still entirely itself. Jon touched his own middle without thinking, where pain sometimes resided these days like a tenant who paid no rent. He had never watched a shell of such dryness feel its own pressure from within. He knew what honey did when you tapped it. He did not know what stone did when something in it punched outward. Perhaps he ought to fetch Melisandre. The thought came and went like a colt that finds a new gate open and then turns back to its old field. He did not move. Everything that would become a chain later felt for this moment like a single link in his hand. The crack, when it came, did not burst anything. It was a fine line that appeared and then refused to be found when he blinked, a hair traced across a scale. Then a second, perpendicular and less shy. Ghost let out the low rumble of a growl that has much affection in it. Jon laid his palm upon the egg, flat and foolish as that was. Heat met him. The place under the crack pulsed. He felt it now, the motion he had imagined earlier. A push, then a rest. A push, then a rest. More insistence with each cycle. He could not say whether the heat increased or whether his hand spoke the language more clearly the longer it stayed. The blood drop on the scales had dried between two of them. Its color was no longer fresh. He could have told himself it had nothing to do with anything, and yet he could not deny that once it had glistened and now there were cracks where before there had been none. The third crack traveled confidently, not minding the geometry its elders had set. When it reached the place where all three might meet, there was a small, precise sound that felt in the belly like the sound of breaking thread. A sliver of something fell, no heavier than a sweep of ash, down onto the floor. The smell that rose then was the smell of hot iron quenched badly, a sour breath of chemistry, and behind it a sweetness that made Jon's mouth fill with saliva. Ghost's whiskers twitched forward. Jon did not know he could be so still until he found he had been. A point appeared, not sharp, broad, blunt as the nail of a newborn foot. It pushed and withdrew and pushed again, worrying at the fault it had found or made. The line of it grew. Then a piece of shell with the pattern of its scales plain upon it fell away, and the sound it made upon the flagstone was heartbreakingly small. There was wet inside. It was darker than the dark outside, as if the interior had been cooped with shadow and only now remembered how to be light. Another piece fell. The shape within was folded too many times to be real. Then it unfolded. A snout appeared, a tongue with rough little teeth that were not teeth yet tasted the air, a slim jaw that worked reflexively. The tiny head was a miracle only to men. To itself it was an unremarkable beginning. Two lids lifted, and what lay beneath was neither red nor gold nor a comfortable brown. It was a pale, pale gray like the inside of a cloud with an almost green ring where iris met pupil. The pupil itself was a narrow blade that widened and narrowed in a tremulous stammer as the light from the brazier moved. Jon did not know whether he had spoken aloud. His throat thought he had said something, but his ear had not caught it. Ghost stepped sidewise until he had Jon between himself and the egg, a protection that was also a challenge to whatever might crawl from the world into their room. The hatchling, their was no other word now, struck its muzzle against another seam and widened the hole. It had no front legs free. It used its jaw like a wedge and its head like a hammer. The membranes across its eyes left a smear upon the shell. When the coil of its neck shook, a shower of tiny shards hissed on the floor like sand under a foot. The little body was all muscle and brasswork, working itself out of a prison it had never known. There were sounds now, small squeaks that from a bird would have been unremarkable, and from this creature sounded like new music stretched across untried strings. When the forelimbs emerged, they were not arms, not in the mammalian way Jon had prepared himself to accept. They were limbs that were also the first bone of the wing. The skin was wet and thin and veined with a delicate lattice, and yet when the hatchling flexed them, the strength was there, promise in a set of hinges that had all the right cleverness. Claws beyond proportion to the thing's size, scraped at stone. Steam wreaths rose where the wet of the egg met the cold of the room. Jon had not expected the sound that came next, though he would later think it the only correct sound. The hatchling sneezed. It shook its head and made the powder-dry noise again, affronted by the world, milk-drunk on air. His tongue flicked. Jon laughed before he could stop himself. A small, astonished sound that was both proud and afraid. A final heave and most of the shell fell away. The creature lay panting for a heartbeat, sides moving too quickly, heat lifting from it as heat lifts from an oven door left open. Ghost nosed the air with the deliberate insult of a clerk sniffing at an unpromising ledger. His ears were forward and flat at once, a contradiction Jon had never seen on the wolf's face. The hatchling made that thin mule again and then, with calculation that looked like accident, scrabbled its way forward. It did not come to the brazier, came to Jon's hand. He drew it away without thinking, and it struck after that motion with its snout. Not a bite, but a bump. Its tiny tongue slid out and tasted the dried smear of blood it had left upon one scale of its own shell, and finding none, hunted with conviction for the real source. Its small mouth found Jon's fingers and lapped them. The heat and roughness of the tongue startled him. He had expected silk and got hide. He lifted his hand and the creature lifted with it, as if his fingers were a rung on its way toward some warmth it desired even more than what the brazier made. He should have been careful. He was careful afterward and before, and perhaps against his will he would always be careful. In that moment he gave in to a human instinct older than any oath. He cupped the creature in both hands and brought it close. Its belly was a hard little drum, its ribs new twigs under skin. Its smell was smoke and river stone and the faint sourness of the albumin it had swum in. He felt a tremor run along its spine, felt the small heartbeat against his thumb. It tossed its head and the wet of its skin cooled in the air and made a skin of its own, tighter, brighter. Ghost's nose came in cool. The wolf huffed, and the hatchling answered with a squeal of affront that was so full of will that Jon blinked. "Easy," he said, and did not know which animal he meant. He tilted the hatchling outward just enough that Ghost could look without presumption. The wolf's whiskers brushed the wing's slim edge, and John flinched before gentleness showed itself. Ghost licked the hatchling once. A grave, disgusted, necessary gesture. The way an older brother might smooth the hair of a younger child and pretend he did not care. The hatchling took immediate insult at being dampened and sneezed again, as if to clear itself of wolf. Its narrow pupils widened and narrowed. It looked at John in the manner of a creature that understands face without comprehending person. It opened its mouth. A thread of heat slipped out of it then, no more than a candle's brief life, a breath of shimmering that found hair on John's wrist and made it curl. He felt nothing of pain and everything of astonishment. He smiled without meaning to. Beside his bed, under Ghost's breath, a faint line of warmth had marred the frost on the iron chest where John kept his spare shirts. A sound outside. Boots in the corridor. John's heart did the thing it did when he had forgotten a knife and then remembered. He dipped the hatchling back into the broken shell as if he could hide it there again, and knew at once how foolish that was. He had seen a life come into the air. He could not push it back into its life without air. He cast about. Ghost turned his head to the door. John pulled the brazier forward a thumb's width and then another, scatter of coals ringing the bowl, burned iron kissing stone. He slid the shell behind the brazier and, without thinking further than the next breath, put the hatchling inside his shirt. The heat of it made him gasp. It was sharp and mineral, a heat that did not leak so much as aim. The little claws ticked his skin and caught on wool. It nestled at the hollow of his breastbone with a single-mindedness that had nothing to do with modesty. He put his palm flat to his own chest, as if he could cradle both their hearts in one gesture. Dolorous Ed opened the door. "I was coming to tell you the wind has decided to push the snow instead of throwing it, which is better news for the snow," he said, and then stopped. He looked at the floor and at John and at the brazier with its scatter of coals, at the wet and the powder of shells. His face made an expression he had saved for funerals and the discovery of rat droppings in the sugar. "Ah," he said, in the tone of a man who realizes he is smaller than the moment and forgives himself in advance. "That sort of egg." "Close the door," John said. The calm in his voice surprised him. It closed it. Ghost stood with the stateliness of a king, one who has decided to let some things proceed without comment. "Say nothing yet," John added. Ed's eyelids drooped in what might have been a nod. "When you tell a man like me to say nothing, it's like telling a fish to think dry thoughts," he said softly. "But I'll swim in silence for now. Does it?" He flapped his fingers at John's chest with awkward impropriety. "Is it warm to the touch? Or am I going to die because I breathed at it?" "It's warm," John said. His hand was still upon his chest. The hatchling shifted. A slide like a pebble moved under cloth. It nosed his skin and then went still, arranging itself with decisive satisfaction. John scarcely dared breathe, and then did, because men without breath cannot protect anything. Ed's eyes flicked to the door and back. "Whose is it?" he asked, and asked it in a voice that carried many other questions. "Whose are you, that this came to your hand? Whose ends will this serve? Whose wrath will this draw?" John thought of the scrap of parchment and the name that was not a name, and of the company that had never broken a pledge except for once, when it mattered most. He thought of girls who had once had eggs on pillows and how their names had become knife edges men cut themselves upon for 100 years. He thought of his father, who had taken a boy into his home and kept a secret for a lifetime that was the same length as a life can be, and of all the other names John had set aside in favor of Lord Commander. He thought of himself, which he had not done for a while. He swallowed. "It's ours," he said finally, and wondered at his daring to say such a thing, and knew he would not be able to stop saying it even if someone showed him why it should be otherwise. "For the watch." Ed's mouth pushed sideways as if it were making its way past old scars. "We have a policy about pets," he said, "but I don't recall if it covered this specific case." Then lower, sober, "They will try to take it. I know. Some because they think it belongs to them. Some because they think you are the man it belongs to and they cannot abide that. I know. And some because they do not understand what it might do. So they will decide for safety's sake to make sure it cannot do anything." John said nothing. Ed nodded as if that were answer enough. The next days did not find an easy shape. He fed the hatchling bits of meat shaved thin and warmed with his breath. It preferred liver, and the way it tore at the soft tissue with polite frenzy made John's stomach both turn and settle. It learned to crawl his shirt as a sailor learns a rigging. It found the notch at his collarbone and clung there with claws too earnest to be anything but love and left pinprick marks that belonged to it more than to him. It slept curled around his wrists sometimes when he wrote, making his hands smell like tin and ash. He hid it as best he could, which was the way every man in a crowded house hides anything he values, by folding the ordinary over it and convincing everyone to glance past. He did not name it. A thing is not less real because it is not yet called. Men with fewer letters than he had always known that. It was not always quiet. It churred and hissed in a manner that made Ghost flatten his ears in mysterious sympathy. Once it blew a brief thread of heat onto the tip of John's quill, which sputtered and suffered and then blackened. John had blackened ends of things in his hands before. He smiled and then hid the smile from himself as if he were an eavesdropper in his own room. Melisandre watched him differently. Not more. She had no more to give. Differently. As if something in him had tilted slightly toward a light she could see and he could not. "Kings are made of choices," she said to him one evening, when the oil in the lamp had almost given up. "Not of blood, but some blood makes some choices easier." "I am not a king," John said. "I do not even have a queen for a stepmother." He regretted the joke as soon as it left his mouth. Melisandre did not laugh. She raised a fire of her own hands and let it die. Celis pressed. These were not days for neglect of pressing. Letters flew south. Letters came north. Men knit themselves into councils to talk about other councils. The Queen's men began to move through the castle with a piety that bumped shoulders. Bowen Marsh tallied his boards and did not look at John's chest when they stood together and measured grain. Yarwick put his hands on wood and made good sense, and then afterward looked at the brazier in John's room with a fear you are only permitted to feel for a thing you cannot work. Cotter Pike wrote again about his cold and his ships and his patience. He wrote about a Bravosi with a tattoo he refused to explain and a woman from Lorith who had tried to get passage farther north. He wrote that a rumor had come on a tide just ahead of the ice. Some prince had put a boot on a beach of the south with men who had golden threads woven into their beards, so a poor light made them look like candles walking. He wished this prince many ills and also some luck, in a fashion that made more sense the longer you thought about the sea. John put Pike's letter down and put his one good hand on the table and thought of the parchment hidden under the dish. He had not told anyone. Not Melisandre, not Ed, not even Ghost, who already knew more than most men do. He told himself he was protecting the watch from the distraction of stories. He told himself many things that made sense, and he knew which were true and which were comfort, and he did not like that he knew the difference. He took the hatchling to the roof of the King's Tower in the morning, when men were busy and women too, and the frost was hard as iron. Ghost went with them. The wind drove color into John's nails. He set the small creature upon the parapet. It crouched and spread its wings and pulled them in a motion that found him in some oldest place and made him the age of awe again. His hide had gone from wet dust to a dry shadow that took on any light it was given and made of it something else. When sun touched a scale, a band of violet slid along it like voice across glass. The little head turned quickly, watching a nothing he could not see and then another. When it made its first real sound in the open air, it startled itself with the size of it and then exulted, a peal like a bell cast of peculiar metal. "Be soft," John said, and knew he was a fool and smiled for the fool. He held out his wrist and it ran along his arm and up, claws saying yes to him with such insistence that he felt his breath go thin. It found his shoulder then and stood there as if on a hill, peering over the world. No piece of Castle Black was unremarkable to it, yet none seemed to frighten it while it had him beneath its feet. Ghost sat with grave patience. His eyes moved between John and the sky and back again. His mouth closed, his breath writing itself on the air in patient lines. "They will have to see," John said finally to the friend who never spoke with a man's clumsy mouth. "Not all, not yet, but some." Or else when they find it in my hand, they will swear every wrong about it that they can name. Ghost did not nod. Wolves do not hold with men's symbolic approvals. He sneezed in a way that blew frost from the stone. Jon took the hatchling back inside. He let it crawl into the crook of his elbow while he read a report from Queensgate about a crack in a post and a fight between two cooks over a pot of peas that had frozen together in a way that offended the older of them. The small body made a length of hot along his arm. He had a boy once with fever fall asleep against him, and he had felt then the same feeling. This is a thing you have to bear, and it will burn your arm a little, and you will be thankful afterward that you lived in a time when bearing it mattered. By evening the castle had caught rumor, and rumor had made a web, and the web had begun to hold, sticky, drawing men's attention from one stone to the next. A thing that warmed rooms and sang beneath boards. A thing that looked at you. A thing that had a smell like iron rain. Nothing has teeth like a story when a household is hungry for anything but bread. Tormund Giantbane came with a laugh that melted frost. He pushed into Jon's chamber without ceremony and filled it the way a storm fills a valley. "There's talk you found a lizard bigger than your sense," Tormund said, eyes bright with mischief that hid a tenderness for which he would kill rather than admit he had. "The men want to know if they'll need bigger pots." Jon lifted the hatchling into the air between them, and Tormund's face changed. It did not go soft. Tormund did not do soft. But the line his mouth made became something nearer to prayer than Jon had ever seen upon that wind-burned countenance. "No pots," Tormund said quietly. "Not yet." The little creature hissed with genuine opinion and folded its wings forward like a shy child thinking other people are a draft. It peered under its wing and then over it and then pretended to be master of all it surveyed so quickly that Jon laughed before he could stop himself. "You have a talent for finding trouble," Tormund observed. "Or trouble has a talent for jumping into your hands." "Either way," Jon said, "I seem to end with the weight of it." "And what weight will this be?" Tormund leaned in until the hairs in his nose moved with the heat from the creature. "Seer woman will want to sing it into her fires. Woman with king will want to put a crown on it, or on the hand that holds it. Old men downstairs will curse it because it isn't oatcakes. Little boys will love it because it's the sort of wrong that makes them right. And you, I will tell a story to my grandchildren about how a young man at the end of the world put a dragon upon his shoulder like a sparrow and did not burn," Tormund said lightly, like a man tying a knot without looking. "Or else I will tell how it ate him in his sleep. Either way, the story's a good one." Jon let the hatchling climb his fingers, and it took his nail into its mouth the way a newborn takes an offered knuckle. Its tiny teeth could not yet bite. They were there to tell the future they were coming. He thought of the parchment under the dish. He thought of names that were meant to be secrets and names that were meant to be banners. He thought of the wall and of nights where sound many miles away seemed to be happening in his own ear. He thought of the way the egg had felt and the sound the shell had made and how his blood had been upon it for one heartbeat and then it had moved. And he did not know how to speak to any of these truths in words that would bear the weight without breaking. "Keep this quiet a little longer," he said to Tormund, which was either the wisest thing he had done that day or the most foolish. Tormund snorted. "I will button my mouth," he said, and made a pantomime of sewing his lips shut that would have made a boy laugh and made Jon want to. "But you cannot button a wind." "No," Jon said, "but sometimes we can make a wall." The wildling's eyes went to the one outside and then back to the small wall of Jon's ribcage where a dragon had slept earlier. He said, "sometimes." The night that followed was not friendly. Celis sent for him and he did not go. Melisandre sent no summons and came anyway, which was worse and better. She stood and looked with her red eye at Ghost and at Jon and at the dragonling sleeping like a heated bruise on Jon's forearm. "Names give shape to fire," she said. "Have you given it a shape of that sort?" "No," Jon said. "If it needs a name, it will tell me." "It already does," she said, with the sort of absolute certainty a woman only gains either from gods or from having been right too many times in a row. "You are merely failing to listen." He did not rise to the bait. "There is a parchment," he said instead, and did not know he meant to say it unt. He was saying it. "That suggests this was meant for a boy in the south." A boy who has set his foot on a southern beach with men whose beards the sun likes. A boy, Melisandre repeated. She did not smile this time. There are so many of those. This one, that one. Children of kings and children of night soil men. All of them wanting fire because fire makes the cold less contemptuous. He may be a prince, Jon said. He did not say Aegon. The name felt too much like a key in his mouth. One he did not yet know which lock it opened. If it is his, if it were yours, she said, with a gentleness that made him want her to be cruel again. Would you give it away, if it were yours by blood? If it were yours by what you have already given it? If it were yours by the law of first glance, which is the only law the old gods write down upon the inside of men? He said nothing, and his silence said things he did not want written in anyone's ledger. The dragonling shifted, and one wing, still not quite dry where the joints met, unfolded and refolded as if the beast were breathing with it. Heat pooled under Jon's wrist, and the smell of new scales made him remember a forge at Winterfell where a little boy had once warmed his hands and thought the world made sense when iron glowed and cooled, and a man who loved him well enough said, "Careful where you put your fingers, lad." If it were his and you kept it, Melisandre said. What would that make you? A thief, he said. A guardian, she said. A liar, he offered. A man, she answered, and then turned aside to adjust the brazier as if it mattered. Kings are made of choices, she said again, and you keep refusing the ones that are offered you and making other ones instead. Footsteps outside, brisk and displeased. Jon pulled his sleeve down without any particular hope of deception. Celis did not wait for an invitation. She came in the way hot wind comes into a tent without asking. Behind her came Ser Axel Florent and one of the smaller zealots Jon never bothered to remember the name of because the zealot did not remember his. The queen's glance set itself on Jon's hands and then on his face and then on the brazier's glow. This cannot stand, she said. She did not say what. Perhaps she meant everything. My husband's kingdom will not be mocked in his absence by trinkets from treasoners and baubles of old families. The thing is mine. I will keep it so that it cannot be used against us. Nothing can be used against you that you do not first fear, Jon said, and regretted how gentle he made it sound, and regretted more that he could not make it sound otherwise. Hand it over, she said. Melisandre moved, which was as bad as she could have done. My lady, she began, and made the queen a courtesy that carried all the wrong humility. Celis' mouth thinned further, and for a small, mean moment Jon felt a sympathy with her. No one wanted to be taught by someone so certain. But that moment was done as soon as he saw the greed behind the righteousness in her eyes. Jon lifted his hands. They were empty. The dragonling, obedient to cold air and to his jaw, had slipped again beneath his shirt, claws testing fabric, heat making a path of itself across his skin. He could feel the tiny weight and the living insistence. It is not yours to hand, Celis said imperiously, misunderstanding him exactly as she was built to. It is mine to take. She stepped past Melisandre and reached. Ghost made a sound Jon had never heard from him, a low, authoritative noise that had nothing of threat in it and was far more dangerous for the lack. It said no like a door closing. Celis halted. She had the good sense to look at the wolf as one does at weather. Axel had not. He took a step as if his boots were owed the step. Ghost took one as if the floor had asked him to. If the queen wants this, she will have it, Axel declared, one hand already halfway toward his sword hilt, though to draw steel in Jon's room would have been theater of the more foolish sort. Stand aside, Lord Commander. Jon did not move. He reached instead for the quiet in himself. He found a corner of it, a familiar corner where he had hidden many Saturdays and all the hours that men make into reasons for anger. No, he said simply. It was entrusted to the watch. We will keep it until the king returns, and then he may lay claim or not. But it will not go south, and it will not be burned, and it will not be brought into your prayers like a lamb. Do you set your oath above your loyalty? Celis asked, poison wrapped neatly in duty. Will you shame my lord? My oath is my loyalty, Jon said, and heard Ned Stark's voice in his own. and did not mind the echo for once. I was not placed here to be steward to a queen. If the king returns and he asks me to choose between king and oath, I will answer him then, but I will not answer you now. Axel moved and Ghost moved, and for half a helpless heartbeat John saw the possible curve of the room's future. Teeth and screaming and blood on iron. Melisandre's voice cut that curve clean in two. "My lady," she said, with something like wonder in it for once. "If you step farther, it will burn you." Celis froze. Melisandre touched two fingers together and then opened them near the brazier, and a strand of fire leapt between them for an instant and was gone. "Some fires are built to consume offerings," she said. "Others are built to answer questions. This one is not ours to do either with. Leave it with the man whose life has not yet finished not being what it is meant to be. If you take it to your bed, it will not love you. It will not love your husband either. If you drop it into the flames, it will only have been hot stones in your hand." Celis breathed through her nose. It made a sound like small glass being broken very far away. Then she turned and left without a word, as if speech were a thing she had decided to spend more carefully in Futu. Axel, robbed of his theater, stumbled after her with indignation clattering. The zealot trailed, a bad thought not yet given up. Melisandre looked at John, and for the first time he had known her, he thought he saw in her expression a look not learned but born, relief. He let breath out. It had been as good as a prayer. The dragonling dug a claw into his skin then. A tiny, unimportant pain that was somehow the most honest part of the entire exchange. He put his hand through his hair and felt sweat where the roots of it clung to his scalp. Ghost sighed. Outside the wind began again, as if it had gone down to the kitchens for a bowl, and come back now because there were men indoors who thought they could ignore it. After that, there were hours and days that moved with the heavy grace of a hunting cat. The dragonling learned to cling to fur. Ghost suffered it with stoicism that approached love. John suffered it with love that tried to look like stoicism. He took the creature where he could take it without exposing it, which was almost nowhere, and kept it where he must keep it, which was with him. It grew quickly in ways only men measure. The scales along its spine hardened. The whip of its tail gained an opinion. His cries lost some of the thinness and discovered new vowels. At night he dreamed of crypts. He had dreamed of crypts since he was a boy, so it did not feel like a message pressed under his door so much as another page in a book he had read before. He walked with a candle that did not drip and heard the feet of animals beside him that were not there when he turned. He came to a place where someone had left a silver dish with a handful of small dark stones upon it. He knew them in the logic of dreams, that egg siblings or cousins, each with its own old dream. He did not take any up. He woke with the smell of stone in his nose and the taste of a word he did not remember having said. One morning a raven brought an untidy letter with ink blots like islands. The hand was elegant underneath the clumsiness, like a rich man dressed as a beggar. It was addressed to no one, as if the writer were writing to the idea of north and hoping the right pair of hands would lift it. It spoke, so far as John could make sense of it, of a meeting intended at a place south of the neck that had not come to pass, of a friend with skin like parchment and lesions that had purpled. John's stomach turned at the lines that must describe the grayscale he had heard of. He had known a little girl at the wall with a face like broken porcelain, and he had loved her more than any right thing. It spoke of a parcel that had gone astray, of a prince whose name was old and whose claim, according to the writer, was more emergency than lineage, and of a promise that the parcel would seek the right hands of its own accord if men did not muddle it too badly. In the margin, a hasty scrawl. If the wrong hands hold it first, the right hands will burn to get it back. John folded the letter and did not put it under the dish. He put it in the brazier and watched it go to a flexing black and then to a red flicker and then to a small soft drift. He did not know whether that was cowardice or common sense. He could not have said, if asked, whether he meant to keep the dragonling because he loved it or because he was afraid of the sort of person who would take it. He told himself it did not matter which motive wore which face if the deed came to the same. The next day he took the dragonling onto the top of the wall. The cold at that height made breath into something you borrowed rather than owned. He set the small creature on the snow, and the snow hissed and made a little cup where it sat. The creature lifted its head and looked into a wind that had nothing in it worth eating, and then looked down again with an air almost disdainful of all the riot of air flowing around it. It hummed in its chest. Jon did not know whether dragons purred, but if they did, he thought it would be like that, a metal be living under the heart. Far out across the white, a herd of shaggy brown moved with the patient arrogance of beasts certain of their own ordinary life. A line of blue ice cracked the muck and went on like a joke told too many times. Somewhere far below, a man chopped at something. He could not swing an axe at properly because the weather had taken his shoulders and made them someone else's. Ghost sat on the snow without complaint, his tails and ears the only signs of his discomfort, and watched everything because everything merited watching. Jon held out his arm. The dragonling took it, climbing with a focus that left smallpox in his skin. It reached his shoulder and turned and opened its mouth. What came out was no more than a sigh of heat and light, and yet it made the air in front of Jon ripple like the surface of a pond after a tossed pebble. He looked through that rippling, and for the first time since the egg had come he felt not desire or fear, not possessiveness or suspicion, not even love, though that was present always now. He felt utility. He felt something in him say, here is a thing that answers a question you have not yet asked. He closed his eyes and the light pressed against his lids like the gentlest candle in the world. He thought of the other boy in the south. He would be a boy to Jon, small and breakable, even if he stood taller than Jon now, even if he had a face that could make swords lower or raise. He thought of a city by a river and of men whose beards were gold in the right light, and of a company that had sworn on contracts until the day there had been a promise they continued to keep in defiance of their own legend. He thought of a man with a dye-stained hand who had succumbed to cold on an eastern beach, and of a smuggler who liked his trade better than he liked his sleep, and of a quartermaster who had found a scrap of a letter in a belt. He thought of how many lives had touched this one object before. It had touched his chest. A wingtip stroked his jaw as if to urge him to trust himself a little farther than was comfortable. He opened his eyes. The world was the same. The world was different. That is what happens when you hold a thing hot enough to make possibility change from story to plan. When he went down again into the castle, he met Bowen Marsh with his slate. Marsh had a new number for him, another tally smaller than it had been. And Jon said what he had to say, and moved the meat that could be moved, and promised the favors he would owe himself later. And when he was done being the man with the board, he went to his chamber and let the dragonling clamber over his shoulders and onto the table where he had all his letters arranged and I intend to wrote and to do underlined in his careful hand. The creature sniffed the ink pot and sneezed, offended at its smell. It knocked over Pike's letter with its tail, and then adjusted its tail in such a way that Jon could not easily set the letter upright again without offending it. He left it as it lay. He had not named the thing, and he did not. But that night, when sleep met him at last and the dreams came, they were of a stair he had never walked that wound upward into a tower with no roof, and of a shadow that went across the moon like a hawk and then kept going and going until it could not be a hawk anymore. He woke with the taste of iron and salt in his mouth and the certainty that the days to come had just shifted on their axis, as if some old weight had been taken from one side of a scale and ferried to the other. In the morning he went to the top of the wall with Ed and Tormund and Ghost and sent a raven with a letter that did not say dragon and did not say egg and named no names anywhere south of the neck. It said only this: send word if any company of exiles passes near the Trident and carries a banner with threads in it, or if a host moves along the Rose Road with a boy at its head who does not know yet how boys walk when all eyes are upon them. It signed with his title, which was a name he had not chosen for himself but had worn long enough now that it had found his shape. He came down with the comfort a man sometimes gets from the act of asking a question out loud, even when he expects the world to ignore him. In his room, the dragonling had made a nest of one of his spare shirts and a map of the gift he had left unrolled on the table. It looked at him with its pale eyes as if he were late to his own life. He took it up and it gave a sound that was half query and half reproach. He lifted his hand to his face and the tips of his fingers smelled of ash. He smiled again at the foolishness of being alive. He opened the window and let cold come in until it bit his teeth. He let the creature feel that pain of air. He let himself. When he shut the window and built the coals again, The brazier glowed with the same patience as it had the day the cask had breathed on the sled. The egg whose shards lay behind it had been nothing then, had been everything. He stood with his hand on the table. He looked down at the map where the parchment was stained darker where the dragon had slept upon it. The stain lay like a small new country. Far away in the yard, boys were throwing their rag of a ball again, and one of them had learned to put a spin on it so that when it hit it skipped and went farther than it had any right to. Men shouted. Somewhere a pot went over too fast and someone said a word he should not have in a tone that made a man forgive him in advance. Bowen Marsh's slate scratched. Celis prayed. Melisandre watched the fire until it told her a story she could live inside. Cotter Pike spat over the side of something and called the sea a name it had heard before. An old company in the south took a road that had not been there the last time they looked, because roads do that under feet like theirs. Jon raised his eyes to the blank of the wall and saw in its unanswering white a kind of mirror that does not flatter or lie. He put his hand to his chest. The scars there were old. The new pinpricks were clean. Under them a heat worked that had nothing to do with the braziers and everything to do with the day a cask warmed a room and a man decided to open it. He went out to meet the day. Ghost trotted at his side, his tail a white scythe through air. The dragonling rode his shoulder. The wind took their scents and did with them what winds do. Carried them, scattered them, made something else of them far away so that a hunter leaning against a tree would think of smoke for no reason. And a child in a house in the village a mile down would taste salt at her breakfast and frown and look toward the wall. Men noticed what they noticed and went on. He went on too, the heat at his collarbone a quiet thing, a secret that was already beginning to be a fact. He did not know yet how choices would ask for him, in what voices, with what knives. But the day had brought him a weight to carry, and the carrying of it was not yet the same as deciding where to set it down. That would come. For now, he kept the dragonling warm and he walked the line of his duty with a steadiness that had nothing of spectacle in it. The snow, bless it or curse it, swallowed sound, and so the only testimony to his steps was what he felt in his bones and what the small life upon his shoulder gave out in that thin, steady humming, that metal bee that had decided a man could be home.